Well, hello and welcome to this conversation that I'm having with Andy Corrigan from Viva La Visa. My name's Dave Webster. I'm the head of international for the Musicians Union, and I'm joined today by Andy Corrigan. Thanks for taking the time to have a chat with us, Andy. We've got a load of questions that we're going to talk to you about, but before we get stuck into that, perhaps you'd just like to sort of introduce yourself and a little bit about the work that Viva La Visa do.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure. Hello, out there. I don't know where, mate. We've done a couple of these things before, both with the MU and with other people, but we thought it was good to have a catch up and see how we were down the line. Viva La Visa, as you may or may not know, we're a company that assists primarily people from the entertainment industry to get visas and work permits to go wherever they need to go. Mostly people from the UK, but by no means all of our clients are from the UK. But basically, we'll help you to go from anywhere to anywhere, anywhere in the world. I think that the purpose of this chat is to talk about the changes that have happened and however things have shaken down since the end of COVID and the sort of how things have settled down after Brexit as kind of become established and kind of, we kind of know what's going on now and how things are working out to a certain extent. And obviously, if you have any questions that aren't covered in this piece today, you can always get in touch with us at Viva La Visa. You can go to hello@vivalavisa.co.uk, or you can always phone us up on our number on the website vivalavisa.co.uk. And we will do our very best to help you. We do, and this has probably come up later, we do offer a free advice service to the music industry, which is kindly sponsored by Help Musicians, the great musicians charity, by which you can get up to half an hour's advice on any not on anything to do with music and travel, and also if it's questions about production, because we have background in that as well. Yes. So I don't know, Dave, do we want to get on with the questions? I hope that's enough of introduction. Enough about me, enough of my yakking, as it says at Smile Tap. We get straight into the questions.
Yeah,
do you want to read them out, Dave, and I'll try and chime in? Or
so some of these have come in from members. Some of them have come from actually colleagues who are assisting members who come to me and ask questions, and I think scratch my head and I go, okay, let's see if we can find an answer to that. And some of them have come from my own work that I've been doing over the last few years. So it's a fairly broad one. We're going to touch on where we're currently at, what the Schengen rules mean and how they impact, because we've seen some fairly devastating reports of musicians being struck down by the Schengen rules. Maybe touch a little bit on the ETIAS that's going to come up in Europe in 2023. So the first one really is, what's the current landscape looking like in the EU, Andy? We're a year or so into Brexit. Things have moved. Where are the difficulties that currently still are around?
I think the difficulty and the major problem the major problem I think is we found in all visa applications is not planning ahead enough, not allowing enough time for things to come up. And not thinking about, not just thinking about you planning your tour, thinking where visas or permits might conceivably be needed in the future, and particularly in connection with the EU, it's the old thorny 90 and 180 day allowance, which is the fundamental of the Schengen agreement treaty done way back when, which is that anyone can come into either needing a visa or not needing a visa can enter the Schengen area for up to 90 days in any 180-day period, and for no longer.
Yes.
And that's something that people need to. That's something that we come across all the time. People have not planned. They've not said they've worked out. They say, oh well, maybe I've got 15 days on this tour. Then I'm going on my holidays for 2 weeks, and I'm going to see me granny in Verona, or I'm kind of and they run out of days. And remember, all the days count. The part days count. And I think this is a question that comes up later. And they run out. There are online, and I'm sure it's on the MU. There's one on the MU website. If there isn't, we can send you a link to it. There's a calculator for calculating how many days you've got left, and it's always calculated from where you are now, where you are at the present?
That's one of the things. Yeah, we have got a very comprehensive guidance note, which you guys very helpfully helped us put together, which has got a link to the calculator on it. But we'll come on to a little bit more of that detail further down the line. But there are any specific countries that are currently more problematic to get work visas for, or to get into to work, than others?
Well, yeah, I suppose there are. I mean, it's a question about this later on in the list, because I've been pre-armed with the questions. Denmark is difficult because that has tight restrictions on it. It has a specific criterion which applies to whether it's permit free or not. But I think in terms of the other countries, most countries have an up to 90-day allowance that you are allowed to perform in those countries for up to 90 days within your 180-day period. Some have lesser allowances. Switzerland has a lesser allowance. Sweden has a lesser allowance, beyond which you're supposed to have a permit or a visa. And one thing I think that people get confused between the differences between visas and permits. Any visa that's required is what's required generally, again with exceptions, is what's required to get you into the country. A permit is what's required to do what you're going to do in the country. So and generally it's not a work visa that you need, and people at the border, for the most part, they don't care what you're doing. They care whether you're permitted to enter the country or not. They're not really concerned with, they don't get involved with what you're doing and when you're in there. They don't consider that their job. So it's the two factors. So 90 days you can have in any Schengen country, but each country has its own regulations about what you are and aren't allowed to do there. Most of the Schengen countries have an allowance for performers up to 90 days, but watch it if you're going to particular countries, because they don't all have 90 days. The major ones do. France, Germany, and now Spain does, but some of the others do not.
That's a good segue into the next question about Spain, because when Brexit hit, Spain was particularly problematic. There was a lot of good work done between some music industry people and I understand the promoters out in Spain to persuade them to change. So what's the actual current situation in Spain now? What's the breakthrough that's happened?
So in Spain, well, this was a change of heart on the Spanish government. Whether it was, the music industry would like to think it was instrumental in changing it, but I think it was one of the factors that came into play. But it was the policy was to make Spain the digital capital of Europe. And this was part of a policy to liberalize regulation, to make it easier for companies to set up in Spain, also to liberalize laws around intellectual property. And so what they before November last year, there was a requirement for a work visa for any performance activity in Spain, an actual visa, not a work permit. So that was, like all immigration law, it's like this is the rule unless it's not. There always seem to be exceptions, and it'd be great if it was all simple, but it's not. So what they decided last November is said, okay, and this applied to the wording was the AV industry, and up to 90 days you can come in and you're permit and visa free for activities.
Just interrupt you there. AV, audiovisual, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, audiovisual. Yeah, that's the wording they use. Whether it's a yeah, and it was intended to apply across the entertainment and tech industries. And so up to 90 days, permit free. Beyond 91 to 180 days, there's a relatively straightforward visa process which can be applied for while you're in Spain. And it doesn't require a work authorization. It just requires, it just means that you have to have contracts to show you're working there.
Okay, so for Spain, you can extend that 90 and 180 days allowance by getting a visa to extend that time in Spain, and you do it whilst you're in Spain.
You can do it. You can do it outside of Spain as well, but it can be done in Spain. Yes.
Okay, so that and that how does that impact then against the Schengen ruling?
Well, that means that the 91 to 180 is a visa that's outside of the that's the clock stops. Your 90 days that you can permit, that you can work without a permit, the clock is running. Your 91 to 180, the clock stops. It's
Right.
out. So
Okay.
it's a national visa. It stops the clock.
So you don't then fall foul of the 90 and 180 days Schengen ruling, and you won't get thrown out. Okay.
But you need, yeah, that's okay. You need to have 90 days of contracts to get it. You can't apply for it for less than 90 days.
Okay, you can't apply for less than.
So it's not. It's great, but it's not that great.
Right.
You know.
Okay. So this is sort of good news for people who are on the back-to-back big tours, the crews, for example, that are so heavily affected by this, the session musicians that are backing the big artists on doing long tours. In Spain, they can actually extend their time period.
Yes, they can, but it has to be for the full period. So it's a kind of a, you know, it's not at first instance it's great. At actual going into the detail of it, it's not that great.
So when you said extend the full period, they have to be working.
They have to have 90 full days of contracted work. They can't have it for 40 days.
Oh, I see. Right. So it's okay. But if we had that across the rest of Europe, for example, that would help, wouldn't it?
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I mean, just to move on to the next one. Here's a specific one about Spain, actually, and this is someone who's working as an actor, a musician, a singer. Frequently works between UK and Spain, and goes and does castings and day-long jobs for recordings of her voice. I think it's a woman. This question has come from, and she has her guitar recorded, and she also does voiceovers for commercials. And she's now having difficulty attending the castings because she's based in the UK. And she's told that she needs a thing called a TIE for Spanish residency or UK citizens, when before, just the UK passport would suffice. So the question is there anything she can obtain in terms of a visa for these short-term jobs and castings? And what does TIE mean?
That's a Spanish residency. She doesn't need one. I mean, our understanding is that she does not need one. She's been misinformed. She can go in for up to 90 days without needing a visa or permit.
Well, that seems right from what we've just been talking about, doesn't it? So for these one-day jobs, one-off jobs, she can just go in. The thing she's got to keep an eye on is the 90 and 180 days.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. So talking about registering, I'm aware that some countries do require you to register your presence when you're working in that country. Is there a list of which ones do that you can refer to?
No, we don't have one.
As how this works.
It depends what you're doing. There are different situations where you're supposed to register, depending on how long you're there, what you're doing, and obviously it's going to be a problem if you're only in the only one across the board one that where you do whatever you're doing you're supposed to is Italy.
Right.
You're supposed to register your presence in Italy, and you should do this by attending the local Questera police station. Do you know anyone that's actually done it in Italy?
I'm not aware of anyone who's actually done it in Italy.
No.
I understand Croatia has a requirement as well.
Yeah, the Croatia one that's a simple process. Right. But you don't have that. I don't believe you have to attend. Italy you are supposed to, but I think it's a rule that's honoured in its lack of observance, shall we say?
Okay.
You're supposed to.
All right, fine. So
again, if it's where you've registered, check what you're doing. Ask somebody if you've got you've got your schedule. Check what you're doing, and and ask the specific question: is there anything I need to do for this particular trip? Because if you go realistically, if you're going into Italy, you're flying into Italy, doing a gig, flying out again, you're not going to have time to go and register to police. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And
I suppose a local promoter could help you with those issues if you're being booked, say, for a week-long set of gigs by a promoter. They would be able to help with those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. You don't know what the consequences are of not
No.
registering, do you?
Well, you can say that who knows?
Right.
I wouldn't like to say. Probably any contravention of any rules does have a potential effect down the line, that if it's recorded and it could be used, it's something that could be used against you at some point in the future.
But no, I've not heard any reports of
No.
people falling foul of
No.
this
No.
kind of thing. And since COVID now, we are seeing an uptick in musicians touring over into Europe, and we're not getting too many negative reports of that.
Yes,
So we
exactly.
talked about extending your work period beyond 90 days in Spain, which you've covered off. So that was
You
my
can
next.
do that, yeah.
Now,
Yes.
just moving to Greece. So Greece was also problematic, wasn't it? But they seem to have capitulated.
Yeah.
And there's a new Greek model in place. But as I understand, well, if you could explain the Greek model, that would be helpful, because I understand it's a bit complicated. And it only runs till, as I understand it, to the end of this year. So do you know what happens after 1st of January 2023?
No, we don't. Yeah, the Greek one is 90 days until I've got a note from one of my colleagues on this one. Sorry. What she said was, Greece agreed that until 31st of December, touring musicians no longer require a Schengen visa to be able to work in Greece for up to 90 days. They've not said what will be required past this date yet, but unless this date that this has been extended, then I would imagine they will revert back to needing a Schengen.
Right. So we could.
But to be honestly, which I think they'll extend it. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Unless they were being, obviously the problem with a lot of these regulations is it's internal politics. Look at the things that pertain in the UK at the moment. The immigration is such a hot potato and perceived by so many politicians as being a vote loser, that any capitulation or any relaxing of any immigration rules at all is seen as being some kind of sign of weakness and weak government. But
the argument we've been making is the issues affecting musicians working in the EU. This isn't an immigration issue; it's a trade issue.
Yeah.
But
in terms of how it plays, it's an immigrant. It's regarded as governments regard it as an immigration issue.
Yeah.
So yeah,
let's talk about Portugal. I get quite a few questions around Portugal. I've just recently been out there, and I was talking to musicians who were there for Womex, and there was no mention of any issues of them being there, albeit that's a showcase event. There seems to be a discrepancy around Portugal. What's on the embassy website and what the consulate have told us do seem to be at a bit of odds with each other. Can you elaborate on that? Do musicians need a work visa or work permit?
No.
No,
they don't. Up to 90 days. What's on the Portuguese website is wrong. We've been told on numerous occasions by the Portuguese consulate that nothing is required. The only time at a visa and work permit would be required is if you're being paid in Portugal into a Portuguese bank account.
Right.
That's the only, and that's never going to happen.
Yeah. So you're acting like a Portuguese employee.
Yeah.
Almost.
And you would.
Okay.
And they made it very clear. Up to 90 days, nothing's needed.
Right. Well, that's
on several occasions, and that's kind of good enough for me.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for clearing that up. So you mentioned Denmark earlier on. As I had a look at this, there's no permit required for work of less than 90 days, but then there's this qualifying statement which says that the musician's participation constitutes a substantial or essential part of a noteworthy artistic event. Now, I went to the Danish embassy and asked them to qualify that to try and get a better understanding of what it really meant, and I've not had a response. Having nudged them, I still didn't get a response. Can you shed any light on this particular wrinkle?
Yeah. What it means is, if your name's on the marquee outside the gig and you can buy a ticket, that's okay. If it's not, it's not okay.
If your name, so if
You know,
you're,
if your name, if you go up to the venue and it
yeah,
says Dave Webster live tonight,
oh God,
€4,
that's
tickets
about right.
available, then that's fine. If it doesn't say that, and it says the Andy Corrigan band, and it doesn't say featuring Dave Webster, then that's not okay. And that's from the Danish employment Siri, no relation to the Apple thing, that's from them. That's what they say.
So if I'm working for you as a session musician, for example,
Well, if you're working for me if you're working for me as a session musician, that's okay because you're in my band. But if you're a support act and you're not named, then in theory that's not. But
right. So
it's basically you're supposed to be part of a publicly ticketed performance, a noteworthy performance. You can be a support person or part of the band. That was a bad example I gave then. But if you're not that, if it's some kind of commercial thing, and we've had cases where people have been making movies or working on kind of those kind of productions, which were not where tickets weren't available to the public, and they've required permits.
Right. Okay. So if I'm in your band and your name's up there for maybe €5,
Yeah,
then I'm okay.
Yeah,
Even if I'm sorting out the travel myself, we haven't got a promoter involved. But if I'm supporting you and my name's not on the ticket, then I'm going to need to get the necessary paperwork.
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's a pain.
Yeah. Right.
A total pain. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Thanks for the clarification. I don't understand why the embassy couldn't have given me that
I don't know.
bit of clarity.
I must admit, it seems like many of these regulations that wasn't the intention. That wasn't. It doesn't. I find it difficult to believe that whoever drafted that regulation, that was their intention when they did it, to prevent small things happening. I think it's one of those things that's kind of, unfortunately worded.
Yeah, I think we're certainly victim to a lot of unintended consequences.
Yeah, we are, because I think that the purpose of regulations regarding employment and work is to protect, is fundamentally to protect the home labour market.
Yeah,
and this kind of stuff doesn't do that.
No, and everybody benefits from cultural exchange, which is one of the arguments. Okay, we talked earlier about Schengen. Let's move the conversation into Schengen and how the Schengen rules apply. And I would say to anybody watching this, do go and have a look on the MU website, because we have a Schengen visa guide that's been put together by your good selves at Viva la Visa. Schengen Entry Entitlement into Europe, it's called, and it does go through what it all means, and the calculator is there. But as I understand it, so we've had some musicians being quite vocal on social media and in the press saying about some issues that they've had when they've lost work because they've hit their 90 days and they've lost big tours and things like that, which is tragic. And they've found that they haven't been able to get, and is it right, the D visa that they need in order to be able to extend their period of work with those artists. Is that the case? And why is it so hard to get hold of?
Well, so in order to so as we mentioned before, each country has its own regulations about for what's required to work or to do activities in that country, and most countries, or all countries, have a category of visa called a national visa, which they issue for lots of different purposes, but it means that it's outside the Schengen agreement, outside the Schengen system, completely outside it. So anytime you're on one of those kind of visas, the Schengen rules do not apply. However, getting one can take a while. This varies, the process varies from country to country. And some countries won't give you one unless you're going to live there and actually show residence there. And some will. And this does vary from country to country, but they all require time to process.
Right.
That's the issue. So when the touring techs are coming to the end of one tour and want to jump on another one, then they haven't allowed enough. They haven't planned beforehand. They haven't allowed enough time to say, actually, in order to do that for the whole, we're looking at it holistically for the whole lot, we're going to be over at that point. So how can we apply for a visa strategically to get us through that period?
Again, that's really difficult, isn't it? Because so many musicians and crews, they're halfway through a tour, they get a phone call saying, we need somebody for this next tour. Can you jump on in 3 weeks' time? And the answer used to be, yeah, no problem. And now it's, difficult.
No, you can't do it. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how it is. I mean, in terms of the countries where you can do it, obviously you can do it in Spain if you have the time booked. You can do it in Germany relatively straightforwardly, and it's and obviously Germany being the biggest market. But no, it is a problem, and it does require time and sometimes getting appointments to have to have the visa processed.
Can
it takes time.
Can you get the visa sort of speculatively?
No. You have to be able to prove that you've got. No, you can't. Well, the only one that you can, and in a way, it's the model that if there was lobbying and, in terms of lobbying and the model that works best for the creative industries is the French talent passport, which can be got speculatively and can run for a year or 2 years. And that means that you can be in France and spend as much time in France as you like, and stop the clock for the rest of the, for your Schengen clock. And that doesn't require it requires you to show that you have some need to be in France at some of the time. So you need letters of support from French organizations, but it doesn't require you to have contracted employment for the period.
Right. So
however,
okay, go on.
But however, applying it to techs is difficult. If you're the lighting designer for Coldplay, you can probably get one. But if you're just a guitar tech, then you probably can't get one, because you have to make the case that you're a creative. It's for creatives. We've done them for lighting designers and sound designers and engineers, and we've done them for writers, authors, models, photographers, musicians, all sorts of people. So that's the model that's the most straightforward and broadly based.
But that's only for France.
Only for France, yes.
But it would be, okay. So there is.
It's a model that I think there's going to be rumors. It's going to be movements to try and it seems to me to be a sensible lobbying thing to try and persuade other countries to issue something along those lines.
Yes, but we need to make sure that the riggers and the guitar techs and the people that make the thing happen are considered as creatives alongside the people actually producing the sounds and the lights. Because without the crews and without the techs, it doesn't happen on these big tours. That's interesting. So we may have answered this question. I'm going to ask again. What does a musician do if they are reaching or have reached their limit?
They have to look. There's nothing they can do. They have to, putting it bluntly, they have to stay at home. They can't do it unless they can apply for a visa, but it's only a single country visa to get them out of so they can be in that country at least. In
that country for the extension, like Spain, but they have to have the 90 days. But that's only Spain. It doesn't apply to every country, does it?
No, the Spanish one, I'm pretty sure it's the 90 days. I think if anyone's got a specific question on this, I think please send us an email on it, and we will give you the detailed, because again, I've done you the overview, and we can give you the proper detail on actually what's required, because it's not quite so straightforward as it might seem at first instance. But the Spanish one, it is doable. And because in Spain the regulations were very complicated around the employment structure of the person, because there's a lot of whether they were regarded self-employed or employed. But no, in terms of going back to this question, if you're on a tour and you get offered another one starting tomorrow, and you're over your days, no, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, okay, that's a brutal reality.
Yeah.
and hopefully that can change over time. But we've all got work to do to try and make that happen.
Yeah.
So here's one that was quite specific came from a colleague actually who's been advising a member. If a musician has a work permit or visa in place for that country, do days worked under that permit or visa in that specific country count towards the 90 and 180-day Schengen rule?
No, they don't. And if it's a D visa, and if it's there are certain visa categories for certain countries against when the clock is still ticking. You need to check exactly what visa you've got. Generally, a D visa doesn't. Some countries issue a particular kind of C visa where it doesn't. Austria does one. But generally, some countries like Spain, and I'm trying to think if there are any others. The Spain, when you required the old Spain Schengen type visa, although it wasn't a Schengen visa, the clock did still was ticking. But no, so generally a D visa the clock will stop.
Right. So you can do the work, and then you can go and visit your granny or have a holiday, and the clock starts again then. But you can do the work under that Schengen D visa, and the clock stops. Okay.
Correct. But only in the country for which it's issued.
Only in the country for which it's issued. And each of the is it 26 Schengen countries?
I think so. Yes. Yes.
They can each issue their own D visa.
They each have their own particular national visas, and it's up to them to issue. They have their own. They're left to their own devices as to what. It's not a uniform EU or Schengen policy about it. It's up to
the sovereign state can.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. You know.
Okay. Here's another one from again from a colleague who's been working with some members on this. If a member is on tour in an EU country and their flight departs to return to the UK at 1 o'clock in the morning on, say, for example, November the 9th, does that date, November the 9th, count towards their total days, even if they were only in the EU country for 1 hour of that day?
Yes.
It's a good question, that. It does count.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
it is a good question.
1 hour becomes 24 in the eyes of this ruling.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow. And so with late night,
well, I mean, this is again, as to my knowledge, this has never been tested in court. It may be that if a person had the time and the deep pockets to do it, they could say right, and they were penalized for this. They could maybe argue. It may be something that they could take to court and argue, and a judge. But as far as I'm aware, there's no case law surround, because like all law, it can be tested by the court, by the courts.
Yeah. Well, I was in Lisbon recently for Womex, and on the day that I flew home, my flight got delayed further and further back into the evening, and then was finally cancelled. We then got bussed out to a hotel somewhere for an extra day, and I didn't get another flight until Tuesday. I was supposed to fly on Sunday. Didn't get on the flight till Tuesday, so I essentially had an extra day within Portugal, which will count towards my limitation.
Yeah,
and yet it was through no fault of my own. I was, circumstances were beyond me. So I suppose I could argue that shouldn't have counted were it to be a problem.
Yeah. Good luck.
Well, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't being frivolous there, but yes, these are things that may someday get tested in the courts.
Yeah.
But the regulations, they can't cover every single possible eventuality. The rules say every day. That means, meaning part of a day.
So what about time zone differences? Because this next question follows on from the last one. Really, it comes from the same colleague. Also, with late night or early hours flights, are there potential circumstances in which time zone differences impact the total number of days? That's a niche question.
Just be on the safe side and say yes, it does. I think it's a sensible answer.
Yeah. Okay. Again, one that might someday get tested, but we don't really know. Yeah. So just looking a bit further afield, over in the US, I mean, since COVID, we've had a lot of delays in backlog in processing O and P visas. Do you know roughly what the lead time is now for processing an O and a P visa?
Are we talking about the whole process, or just the actual embassy process?
Well, Give me both. I mean,
Okay, well, the whole
when should you
any
start?
kind of
We've always
American.
said 3 months. Get going. 3 months. Is it a longer time period now?
Hello, are you still there? Have you gone?
Hello.
Sorry, did you go then? Can
No,
you still see?
I
Can
can
you? I
still.
can't see you, Dave, but you can still see me.
Yes, I think we're still
Okay.
going.
Okay, fine. I'll just carry on. Just you went. Okay. So with regarding American visas, there, I don't know how many. Again, please, forgive me if I'm being patronising to everyone that's hopefully listening. The American visa process, work visa process, is a two-stage process. First is what's called filing a petition in the US, which is an application for basically what's a work permit. Which is filed with the USCIS, a US government organization. The filing of that, the processing of that can take that's a two-track system. You can go by the normal processing, which can take anything up to 3 months. It can take less, or it can take more. There is no guideline or no time constraints on that process. It takes as long as they choose it to take. Or if you want a guaranteed answer within a specified time, you pay another $2,500, and you have the premium processing, which guarantees you an answer within 3 weeks. Okay. And so that's how long it takes. It was going to take you on the front end of that probably at least a week to put together the petition documentation. And then 3 weeks to process it on premium, or up to 3 months on non-premium. And then in terms of the end of that, once you've got your approved petition, it's the equivalent of a work permit. You take that to the embassy and go and get a visa, and that takes about 3 to 4 days, around 4 working days from your appointment. And in terms of availability of appointments, well, they're pretty available at the moment. There's not. I checked with my team in the office earlier on today, and they're saying there are no delays, and there's a reasonable availability of visa processing. We're having to use other embassies sometimes, but it's all flowing. Certainly on the petition side, it's flowing as it should do.
And the same for B1 visas, yeah.
No, B1 visas. There are no appointments available for B1s. It'll be probably 6 months wait for a B1 visa appointment. And the problem with B1s is
Okay, we've lost Andy for a minute. He's frozen. I know we're recording this for use. Might just pause it for a second, and then we'll see if we can get Andy back.
Okay.
So we're back on. I think we've got Andy back.
Okay, hello.
B1 visas, and they can take sometimes up to 6 months, depending on Andy.
It's purely availability of appointments, and it does vary, but it's generally it's a few months.
Okay. Well, for those who are watching, if you're interested in US visas and things, we've got very comprehensive advice on the website. We've recently had an update from Matthew Covey at Tamizdat regarding South by Southwest for 2023, so you might want to have a look at that. Just going back to Europe briefly, the ETIAS scheme that is coming in, Andy. This is the electronic tagging. It's a little bit like the ESTA in the US, isn't it? Where you apply for an electronic permission to travel, basically what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's coming in 2023. So how's that might affect our members, musicians working over in the EU?
Well, it should. I don't think it. Well, will it? The only way it will affect musicians, I think, or anybody, is, well, it's two possible ways. One is that there's going to be a more accurate record. They're going to know where you've been and where it's going to be easier for the authorities to know when you've entered and when you've exited, although people get stamped in and out, and obviously that's one of the reasons it's there. So in terms of people trying to there's going to be it's more record of what you've been doing. The other thing is that there's the bars, sort of the criminal issues, that at the moment there's no requirement to declare any criminal convictions. to go into the unless you're actually applying for a visa. On the ETIAS application, there'll be a requirement to declare criminal convictions. Although we understand that the bar is quite high, it's not like an ESTA, where any kind of controlled substance conviction or arrest will get you denied. It's going to be a rather higher bar, involving jail time. So that probably won't affect many people, but it's still something that potentially you can get denied.
And this is something that we'll have to apply for. I understand it's going to cost around €7 to get the ETIAS in place, and we have to apply for it before we go. One of the things that we've got on our website, we've got an ETIAS FAQs, and it says, will ETIAS apply to the UK? And the answer back is, all UK passport holders who wish to travel to the Schengen area will need to apply for ETIAS travel authorization by May 2023, when the scheme becomes fully operational. But then it says, UK residents who currently require a Schengen visa to enter the Schengen zone will not be eligible for ETIAS and will need to continue to apply for Schengen visas as before. Can you explain that?
I'm trying to think. Well, I can't think of any reason why you require a Schengen visa. I honestly don't know.
Right.
Unless you weren't a full UK passport holder, unless you had a UK overseas passport, dependent passport, or of some kind. But I think that's basically saying that if you need a visa, you can't have ETIAS. Simple as that. And it's no more,
right.
No more kind of
Okay, so right. So
in the same way that you may not be applicable, it may not. Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head. I can't think of any reason why you would need, if you're a UK passport holder, you would need a Schengen, unless it's for something in your past immigration record. But I think all this is saying that if you need a visa, you still need a visa, and you're not going to be able to go on ETIAS.
Right, I see. Yeah, so it's for.
And also the UK has got its own scheme that's supposed to be coming in next year as well. The same kind of thing for people coming to the UK.
That's right. Yes, and we haven't heard yet if that's actually going to happen or not, but we believe it is coming down the line. Yeah,
I believe so. That's what they say. Yeah.
And the ETIAS, if you apply for it, will last you for 3 years.
Yeah.
So if you've got an ETIAS that lasts you for 3 years, but then you need to apply for a Schengen D visa, for example.
Not a Schengen. It's sorry.
A national.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same as the US. You've got your you've got your ESTA, and if you're working, you apply for a work visa.
And then you need an O or a P if you're going to do
or whatever.
outside of the showcase. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. That kind of covers that. Just going back to, you mentioned earlier on that you're working with those great people at Help Musicians UK. We've had a long-standing relationship with you, as you know, and they're providing the resources to be able to fund half-hour advice sessions. Can you just explain a little bit about what you can offer to our members? Because there's a 20% discount in place, isn't there?
Yeah, we continue to, as we have done for quite a few years, to offer Musicians Union members a 20% discount on our services. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean if you come to us and we give you a quote for an American visa, it's 20% off your whole bill. It can only be 20% off our part of that bill, because all the costs, the petition costs, and visa actual fees, we just pass on at cost. We don't, there's no markup on those.
Those are fixed by the US, aren't they? Those costs?
Yeah, they're fixed by yes, they are
union fee, the processing fee.
Yeah, so we don't. Those we're stuck with those, and those are what they are. But certainly on our fees, we'll continue to give a 20% discount if you quote your MU number, and the Help Musicians service is available to both to MU members and in fact to non-MU members.
Yeah.
And that gives you get it's designed for up to half an hour of consultation and help. It's not designed for specific visa, because there's a limit to how much detail we can go into that in that service. But it can be give you a pretty jolly good idea about what's required for.
And if any questions have come out of today, specific to what a member's requirement might be, they can give you a ring and pick up on it.
I think if anyone's at all interested in Spain, they should ping us a message, and we'll give you a kind of clear ruling, a clear guide on it. What's what the requirements are, because it's a wee bit complicated, especially on the over the up to 90 days is really clear and simple. It's what happens, the processes that happen after that, and where the requirement for a work permit comes in, because there is a route to go on the Spanish route to go more than 180 days, to go beyond that on the same route. I mean, again, their intention was to open it up and mean that the broader audiovisual industry can continue to operate, can operate in Spain. But again, there are a few little snares in the long grass there,
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, ideally, what we'd like to see is a level playing field across Europe for our members working.
I think
back to where we were, but it's a hard one.
Yeah, I think that realistically, sorry, Dave, I think that to get all those countries to agree is going to be impossible. And going back to the 2014 negotiations that Pearl, the European trade organization, were party to get a pan-European creative visa, that kind of fizzled because people couldn't agree, and the UK were never part of that anyway. Because and I think the way forward in terms of lobbying is the country by country, and I think that maybe the French model is is probably the most straightforward, and it's a straightforward ask in a way.
Yes, and that's something that the music industry, we're all working very hard together to get those bilateral agreements in place, but it is a long time, and there's 27 of them. So,
well, there's 27 of it, which is daunting, but it's the big ones that are kind of the ones you want, and the others probably will, may well fall into line. I think possibly.
Yeah. Well, we're nearly at the end of the hour. I think we've exhausted all the questions that I've got. Is there anything that you think I might have missed, Andy?
No, Dave.
Our members knowing.
As usual, you've been very informative and comprehensive. Again, I'll just say, if you've got any questions, ask them, and ask them sooner rather than later. And ask them. Please feel free to. We like to think we are approachable. Ask us, and don't. You can dive deep into the internet, and you can get any answer you want. Probably you'll get someone's opinion that you'll agree with. But ask first, and ask as soon as you're as soon as what you've got plans to do something.
When you're planning a tour.
And don't be embarrassed by thinking, I should know this, but it's...
And there's loads of resources on the MU website that are available to members. We've done a lot of work around carnets, around, taking your merchandise and those kind of things. So do have a look at the MU website, the flowchart, and all the associated bits of documentation. But don't just look at one, look at all of them, because they are all, it all sort of dovetails when you're planning a tour. And as Andy says, a super early prep is advisable. Thanks ever so much for joining us, Andy. It's
pleasure, Dave.
Great to talk to you, and we'll get this up on the website, and hopefully members will have a look, and you might get some inquiries. So all the very best. I'll press stop on the record now, and thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Goodbye.